Water systems are critical infrastructure. Treatment works, sewage systems, pipelines, dams, and reservoirs support essential services from sanitation and drinking water supply to irrigation, flood protection, and power generation. It's the very importance of these water systems that has historically made them recurrent targets of war. Yet the ways in which these systems are threatened is changing over time. From local farmers fighting for control of a well to national armies clashing over control of a dam, new water security risks are emerging, from terrorist groups seeking to contaminate city water systems with toxins to cybercriminals seeking to hijack water utilities with malware. I'm David Michel, Senior Fellow for Water Security with the Global Food and Water Security Program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. You're listening to a 6-part podcast exploring the dynamics of water conflict and the possibilities of water cooperation. This is Hidden Depths.
New York City is in shock. One of its most famous landmarks destroyed, thousands dead, and America is under siege.
Since the attacks of September 11, 2001, security policy communities have focused heightened attention on the risks that extremist groups could strike against society's critical resources and infrastructure of all kinds, including water. The dangers are not implausible. In 2003, Jordanian authorities arrested Iraqi agents in a failed plot to poison water supplies serving American troops. In 2017, the Taliban blew up a dam in Kandahar province, Afghanistan, cutting off irrigation waters for farmers across the remote Shorbak district. Violent extremism presents a growing threat to water security as more terrorist actors utilize water as a tool of conflict. To better understand the threat, Jennifer Veilleux, a geographer at Wageningen University, joined with colleagues at Florida International University to analyze incidents of water-related terrorism worldwide.
Water-related terrorism, as we define it in our study, is the use of water to control, invoke harm, or invoke fear for some political end. The study we did was 1970 to 2016, and that was bound by the global terrorism database that we used. So we did a count, and we had 675 incidents worldwide. There were over 3,000 people either killed or wounded in these terrorist attacks.
124 different militant or extremist groups committed terrorist attacks, but the research revealed that 4 main groups, motivated by disparate ideologies and agendas, predominated among the perpetrators.
4 of these are the FARC, the Shining Path, the Taliban, and the Islamic State.
FARC, the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, and Shining Path are Marxist guerrilla groups that operated in Colombia and Peru, respectively. The Taliban and Islamic State are Islamic jihadist groups operating primarily in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and the Middle East. Together, these 4 groups accounted for over 100 terrorist attacks. Veilleux and her colleagues also developed a typology for different kinds of terrorist actions.
If we center water as something that terrorists either use or impact, we came up with different categories. And these categories are water infrastructure, water people, water transport, water as a weapon, water as collateral, and water as a grievance. The types that were the most prevalent were the water infrastructure, and those account for 359 of those over 600 incidents, which is about 48% of all the attacks were water infrastructure.
Using water as a tool of conflict, terrorist attacks struck installations for storing and delivering water, such as dams and pipelines, but also water-related transportation infrastructure, such as boats and bridges. Some groups deployed water as a weapon. The Islamic State controlled captured dams in Iraq to either flood or to deprive its adversaries of water. Other terrorist incidents impacted water as collateral damage. In Colombia, FARC regularly bombed oil infrastructure that then contaminated nearby water supplies.
The largest environmental disaster that ever happened in the history of the country of Colombia happened after FARC hit an oil infrastructure, oil pipeline, and contaminated a whole area of freshwater resource that was used for about 160,000 people.
Whether as the intended target or as indirect collateral damage, water has proven to be a tool and a victim of violent extremist conflict. But in addition to attacking water sources and infrastructure, terrorists also often take aim at individuals related to the water sector.
Infrastructure must be managed so that the economy can flourish and the most affected areas can develop. In reality, those who are most affected by terrorist acts of subversion are civilians.
Threatening officials, managers, engineers, and maintenance workers gives extremist groups another means to sow instability and weaken government authority and activities. On several separate occasions, the Taliban attempted to assassinate Ismail Khan, Afghanistan's Minister for Energy and Water. These incidents led the researchers to create a category of attacks on water people.
Water people could be somebody that's out there fixing some water infrastructure pipeline. It can range from the people making decisions about water to the people that are implementing repairs or maintaining security of national infrastructure. Anybody that's related to the water that comes in harm's way because of a terrorist activity.
Across the different terrorist tactics and targets, Veilleux and her colleagues found that many attacks were committed around what they classified as water grievances, reflecting conflicts with the government or corporations over water rights, uses, or access to a water resource.
It seems to be there's lots of motivations for groups of people to get together and cause havoc to make their voices heard. One of the key changes is understanding that the motivation of someone who might be identified as a non-state actor that's using terror, using violence or the threat of violence to an end, right? To either send a message to a government or to a population or both.
Some of these attacks involved international water disputes. In Afghanistan, for instance, the Taliban has sometimes served as a proxy for Iran, with Tehran reportedly supplying weapons and training for the Taliban to sabotage Afghan dam developments that could disrupt river flows to the Islamic Republic. Other attacks have been carried out by subnational groups or individuals opposed to government or corporate water projects.
We found in our work that a group of people that has political motivation, which is how we defined it, right, wants to make themselves heard, they can go after infrastructure, and they do.
Several attacks involved insurgent groups based in ethnic minority regions or marginalized populations that targeted projects that these groups viewed as tools of state control or domination of their communities. In the Kurdish region of eastern Turkey, the PKK, the outlawed Kurdish separatist group, has mounted multiple attacks against various Turkish water projects, kidnapping workers and setting explosives. In India, different indigenous insurgencies across the country's far northeastern states have attacked project sites and killed or abducted laborers. And in Pakistan, the Baloch Liberation Front has murdered workers at the Marani Dam. The violence in Pakistan also came to embroil the Chinese construction firms and laborers erecting such projects. Veilleux explains the dynamics underlying these conflicts.
In essence, you have this water infrastructure and economic development as used in oppressive ways by governments. Making decisions for ethnic minorities or indigenous populations without consultation, without consent, coming in and sort of eclipsing whatever the local use of the water will be, nationalizing the space. Imposition of a dam or some sort of water infrastructure was a way to get into that space, to take land, to then create an open door for state enforcement, maybe in the form of military or police, to be able to take that space aggressively and by force and put in the agents of governance to hold the space.
Veilleux suggests that a number of water grievance conflicts are embedded in larger contexts of violence between water development projects designed to consolidate state power and subnational militant groups that strike at these same projects to contest state authority and assert self-determination.
I think if we were to do another study to look at state actors, governments themselves, and how they use water to manipulate, control, and perhaps destroy their populations, we would see that water as a weapon is used with more frequency, because we have to be critical about these things and understand that we are functioning within inequitable systems, oppressive systems, and then what's happening at the local level to the actual people living in those spaces that are then subject to development, water development. Their land's been taken, their resources have been taken, they've been removed from power structures, they are disenfranchised, that these systems of oppression will have a backlash at some point.
Violent extremism can feed the flame of water-related conflict, posing a rising challenge to water security worldwide. So far, the vast majority of water-related terrorist attacks have taken place in the physical world. But like much of the rest of our societies, the water sector too is increasingly digitalized and connected to the internet. This creates new pathways for attacks on water systems and infrastructure, by terrorists, criminal networks, hackers, and by states. Riccardo Taormina, an assistant professor at the Delft Technical University in the Netherlands, speaks to the complexity of water security in the digital age.
The main reason why most of our water systems, especially in some part of the world, are, let's say, connected to the internet, connected to the outer world, is because we want basically to manage this infrastructure in the best possible way, in a more cost-effective way. We want to perform advanced analytics. We need to exploit digitalization. Almost all the main type of infrastructure, drinking water distribution, urban drainage systems, water and wastewater treatment plants, even irrigation systems and dams are increasingly more connected to the outer world.
Connecting to the outside world has transformed how we manage water resources, from urban utilities to farmers' fields. With digital sensors and internet links, city managers can now monitor water quality remotely, spotting leaks in the network without leaving their desks. Farmers, too, have seen a revolution, automating irrigation systems that respond to real-time weather data and soil conditions. But these same connections also open the door to hackers, spies, and cybercriminals. Taormina explains that it wasn't always this way. In the past, the operational technology, or OT systems, think of the tech that controls valves, pumps, and gauges in water plants, were completely separate from the information technology, or IT systems, used to manage water services. In simpler terms, the machinery running our water infrastructure wasn't connected to the business networks or office computers. This air-gapped setup meant that to disrupt a water treatment station, such as by shutting off critical pumps, an attacker had to be physically inside the plant. But today, that's no longer true.
We used to have these air-gap systems, which were very secure, unless, of course, you attack them from inside. Of course, this is changing as we start interfacing the IT and the OT domains. Before, you would usually indeed need to have direct access or close to it to the OT systems. And now that we are seeing more and more of this IT-OT convergence, then start from the outer domain, like from the IT, which is easier to reach in a way. They can basically, starting from, let's say, from the outer layer, go all the way down to the core, to the physical process, and all components that are somehow accessible, directly or indirectly, let's say, they are all subject to cyber attacks.
The number of potential vulnerabilities in water systems has significantly increased, expanding what cybersecurity experts call the attack surface. The larger the attack surface, the more ways for bad actors to break in. These intrusions can start with something as simple as a phishing text or email, a fake website, or even a Wi-Fi attack. From there, cybercriminals can slip through the digital cracks, moving from IT networks into the physical infrastructure that keeps our water systems running.
The attack surface got bigger as we are carrying out this IT, OT convergence. I think if you think about Stuxnet, I think it was someone connecting a USB with a malware system in it, and then sort of like via the first computer, then spread over. People now are also more concerned with the supply chain, meaning that you purchase something and you think that this is safe, but it is not. And then when you start downloading updates, for the firmware and other things, basically they actually can also download malware from outside and bring it within the infrastructure.
Taormina says that different types of malicious actors typically present different types of cyber risks.
There is a classification of attackers depending on, say, their motives and their expertise. So we can have hackers all the way to state-backed terrorists, which are extremely skilled and have a lot of resources. And this is also linked, of course, to the type of attacks and the type of threats that can be carried out. So cyber criminals, which are interested in let's say, that do this for economical reason, they tend to increasingly more perform ransomware attacks, which indeed are on the rise also for water system. We've seen several of them in the UK and other parts of the world in the last few years. Other type of attacks can be also linked to terrorism or like similar type of intention.
Impacts from cyber threats aren't confined to cyberspace. Cyber criminals or extremist groups using digital tools can cause considerable harm in the real world. By hacking into treatment plants or pumping stations, for example, terrorists could contaminate or compromise water supplies for whole cities. Taormina also points out that potentially vulnerable water systems aren't connected only to the internet. They're also connected to other vital sectors like energy and agriculture.
You can have problems in interconnection also from this point of view. But if you think already about the water energy nexus, or if you put also telecommunication into it and transportation, there are maybe more rare but very impactful scenarios where you have cascading vertically across maybe different sectors, transportation, power grid, energy generation, water and wastewater, and so on and so forth. And maybe that can stop functioning due to a cyber attack.
Worrisomely, state actors are also moving into cyberspace to leverage water as a tool or target of conflict using so-called gray zone tactics short of conventional warfare. Russian military intelligence cyber units have reportedly attacked multiple water facilities in Ukraine. US, British, and Canadian cybersecurity agencies have identified state-backed and pro-Russian hackers targeting water systems in North America and Europe.
Unfortunately, we're seeing increasing levels of conflicts across the globe, and cyber warfare is something that is here already and may well escalate. When it is done to critical infrastructure, though, then it becomes I wouldn't say disturbing. It's very concerning and can be then like a reason maybe to start a real war, I would say, because critical infrastructure is there to provide essential services to society. You gotta be careful because it can be really an act of war that can escalate beyond cyber warfare.
The full extent and ramifications of cyber risks to the water sector can be difficult to judge. There is a gap between the plausible threats identified by researchers and actual incidents, says Taormina, and most attacks are not publicly disclosed. New potential dangers are emerging as digital technologies evolve. Artificial intelligence is one such prospective risk. Taormina foresees that AI and machine learning could be used both to create new methods of cyber attack and new means to defeat cybersecurity defenses.
Use of generative AI with respect to creating malicious software is something that could be a new problem, meaning that if you look a few years from now, there might be a chance that they will be able to develop more sophisticated threats, malware, and so on and so forth. One thing that is also linked to the discussion about AI, the protection of critical infrastructure, is a high-risk application of AI systems there are so-called adversarial machine learning methods that you can use to trick this system. There is actually a risk of these adversarial machine learning approaches to fool AI system into not identifying attacks.
Cyber risks to the water sector are growing. Many water systems, however, may be unprepared for the rising challenges. In the United States, the Environmental Protection Agency found that 70% of the facilities it inspected had violated legislated security requirements. Yet Taormina stresses that society's cyber defenses can be significantly strengthened by implementing basic security controls.
It's really a matter of common sense and implementing solid guidelines, which we have, that really can prepare us for most of the threats out there. Then it becomes much more difficult for an adversary to actually hack our systems. I can see this in the European Union, each member state, and also each individual stakeholder, let's say in each individual, like water utility, water authority. They need to implement strict security protocols. In the end, it always boils down to humans. So humans at any level of the organization, working at any level of the organization, should be aware of cybersecurity.
Whether the risks emanate from extremist groups, cyber criminals, or nation states, robust cybersecurity defenses will be crucial to protecting the water sector from one set of complex threats in an increasingly digitalized and interconnected world. But global water systems and resources face a myriad of multifaceted challenges. I'm David Michel at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. You've been listening to Hidden Depths. Hidden Depths is an initiative of the Project on Water Security, part of the CSIS Global Food and Water Security Program. Thank you to our guests, Jennifer Veilleux, a geographer at Wageningen University, and Riccardo Taormina, assistant professor at the Delft Technical University. Thank you to Ruby Bledsoe for clip translation, and Michael Kohler for translation voiceover. Hidden Depths is produced by Sarah Baker, edited with Emma Dodd, and narrated by David Michel.